Psychic powers. What
Hmm.
did Aquinas have to say on this?
So they didn't have the term psychic powers at the time. That's actually a very recent term that was invented in the 19th century.
Hmm.
But Aquinas, so, you think about spirits. Aquinas knows we've got spirits, and he knows spirits can influence things because God can influence things, and angels and demons can influence things. So, would human spirits have the ability to influence things like matter, the same way God and angels and demons can influence matter? Well, the he would say yes. Now it's obvious our spirits can directly influence our own bodies. If in your spirit you say, I'm going to raise my hand, well, then you can raise your hand.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what influence might our spirits have beyond our bodies? Well, according to Aristotelian physics, was the best physics they had at the time, you in order for one thing to affect another, there must be a physical medium connecting them. It's like, in order to hear someone speaking, there has to be air
Mm-hmm.
or something between you and the speaker so that the vibrations of their voice can get to you. They don't travel across a vacuum. And so any remote influencing ability the human spirit might have beyond its own body would have to be through some physical medium to connect you as the cause of the effect to whatever is being affected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Aquinas said that can happen. At the time, and this is very broad in the Greco-Roman world. It's all over the place in Jewish and Christian and pagan societies. There is a belief in what's called the evil eye.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the evil eye can take different forms, but it's understood different ways. But one of the most common ways it was understood is that a person, maybe an old, and this was often attributed to old people, and especially old women, but old people could, if they're mad at you, they could look at you in a way that causes bad things to happen to you. And that's what the evil eye is.
Okay.
And it was thought children were especially vulnerable to the evil eye. So you really don't want an old woman giving a poisonous look to a young child, because the young child might be hurt by the evil eye. And so I don't know, maybe the lesson is respect your elders.
Yes.
But Aquinas said, okay, well, human spirits can have influence on things.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a physical medium connecting one human to another, that influence could be transmitted along that medium. And so, he said, when the spirit is vehemently moved to malice, so you're really mad at somebody, that could get out through your eyes and infect the air, and the air could transmit the harm to another person. And since children are small and frail compared to adults, they would be especially vulnerable to the evil eye. And so this was Aquinas's explanation for the evil eye. Now, they, like I said, they didn't have the name psychic power in their day, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking because a psychic power is supposed to be a natural human ability to detect or influence things remotely. And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about a natural human ability, something built into human nature. This is not a miracle God is doing. It's the demon is not doing this. You are doing this. But you are remotely influencing another person. And so today, this in parapsychology studies, this would be called remote influence or telekinesis. And so Aquinas thought that humans have a weak, obviously not very powerful if it's there at all, because we can't do it easily, but he thought humans have a weak natural telekinetic ability. And that's not the only psychic power he thought people have. He also thought that we have a weak natural ability to know the future. So he and as you would expect, he thought this was because of the stars. But the stars, he thought, influence all kinds of things, like the weather and whether there's going to be a war or not. And so he thought that the influence they have on ordinary events could also have an influence on our imaginations, on our imaginative faculty. And this could then manifest in dreams. So he would say sometimes when you can have a precognitive dream, a dream that tells the future. Now, this could be due to a number of reasons. It could be because God's given you the dream. So it could be not because of the stars, but because of God. And we obviously see examples of that in the Bible. Where God gives Joseph a dream or something. He also said, okay, demons could mislead you by giving you a dream about the future. And we see, like in Acts, a girl Paul meets who has a spirit that is used to predict the future. So this is something that they could do. Now, they don't do it perfectly, Aquinas says. Lesser spirits than God can't directly perceive the future because they're not outside of time, but they can make calculations about what's likely to happen. And so spirits could also cause this. So can random chance, Aquinas says. You could just randomly dream something, and most dreams are random, he would acknowledge. You could randomly dream something. By coincidence, it could happen to come true. Or it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you dream something and think it's going to come true, you might act as if it's going to come true, and that could lead to it coming true. But he would also say there can be natural causes out there in the world that impress, including the stars, that impress themselves on our consciousness, such as when we're dreaming, and we could have this, what he called natural prophecy, distinct from supernatural prophecy, where God gives it to you. So Aquinas talks about natural prophecy. He says, unlike supernatural prophecy, it's not always accurate because it's not coming from God. It's based on other stuff, and other things could interfere with it. But he says it is not the sin of divination to use dreams to know the future if it's either coming from God or it's coming from the knowledge of the future is coming from some natural source. Well, back then, they didn't have the word psychic powers, but what he's talking about, if there were a natural human ability to detect the future or know certain things about the future with, apart from just calculating it, that would be what today we would call precognition. And so Aquinas thought that this was another weak natural human ability.
Yeah, fascinating. Before we get into crystal healing, I just want to kind of throw out something that people might be thinking. They might be thinking, look, Aquinas, this all just seems so fantastic. And Aquinas seems to have been wrong on a number of these things. So why take him seriously at all when he talks about metaphysical realities?
We have to distinguish between as Aquinas likes to do, we have to distinguish between a few things. When Aquinas is dealing with scientific matters, he has to be judged against the state of science in his day. And this was all, even though this stuff sounds fantastic to us, this would have been totally normal to people in the 1200s. We're not in controversy area here. All these things.
Right.
This was just the science of their day.
I was going to quickly interject there. Just like false things we believe today that are apparently backed up by scientific evidence will seem absurd 200, 500 years from now.
Exactly. A lot of our beliefs, scientifically, that we think we've got evidence for, the evidence is not as solid as we think. And in 500 or 1,000 years' time, that's going to be obvious. So people are going to look back and say global warming or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That's the scientific fad of the day. So Aquinas is doing the best he can with the science of his day, but when he's dealing with non-scientific matters like metaphysics, well, metaphysics is philosophy. it's not science. And so it relies on a different set of principles. And so if the underlying metaphysical principles that Aquinas uses are accurate, then the conclusions he draws from them should be taken as accurate. Just like if the scientific things he was talking about had been accurate, the conclusions he drew from them should be accurate. I mean, if it was true that the stars had the kind of influence he thought, then his reasoning would be sound. Turns out the basis was not solid. The stars really don't have that influence. But in the case of metaphysics, the principles are not grounded in a way that shifts scientifically. They're more fundamental than that. Similarly, when he talks theology, he's basing that not on the scientific ideas of his day. He's basing that on things like Scripture. And so you have to, it's the garbage in, garbage out principle. Aquinas is a good reasoner if he's given good data from a given source, whether it's theology or philosophy or science. He'll come up in the main with good analyses of that, but you have to ask the question, how good is the data he's being given?
Yeah, it takes a nuanced view, doesn't it? Because on one end of the spectrum, you'll have people who'll see some of this stuff and say, well, you can't trust him with regards to anything. But on the other end of the spectrum, I can see some people, maybe particularly in the traditional camp, who wouldn't want to question Aquinas on anything. So, for example, and I want your take on this, one of the things Aquinas says when he talks about nocturnal pollutions is the idea that maybe we had I think he talks about eating meat and how this can sort of stimulate the passions. And I think there is this idea among the ancients that when you eat red meat, this can make you more passionate. But I actually heard someone say that to me the other day as if it were a fact. And I think their only basis for thinking that was Aquinas said it. So,
that would be a scientific claim.
That would be, right.
And so I would want to know, have there been modern scientific studies that would back that up? And as far as I'm aware, the answer is no.
Well, it was funny because this person was of a traditional bent and not terribly friendly with vegans. And I said, well, if that were true, wouldn't that make vegans just super placid, gentle people? And she wasn't willing to go along with that. But that is interesting. Like, we have to make these distinctions. This is why Jesus Christ established a church, to be able to guide us as we read Scripture. We can't hang our hat on one particular saint and say he's right and everyone else is wrong, no matter what.
Well, and Aquinas himself would not want us to just take everything he says uncritically.
Exactly.
He himself was an integrator of knowledge from multiple different fields, and he would want us to take a similar approach and be open to knowledge coming from multiple different fields.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.